Hello, everybody. What is up? Just editor Kiko here, jumping in before we get started. Wanted to make note of a couple things. First of all, the day we recorded this, my voice was kind of weird. So if you hear it kind of sounding like it's dropping out or whatever, that's not an audio issue. That's just my voice kind of struggling that day. Also wanted to make a quick note that we had a couple little Zoom dropouts. So if there's a couple places where you hear kind of a weird edit or it sounds like the conversation's sort of shifts in a weird way, that's mostly just due to that. As of the actual putting out of this episode, some of the stuff we're talking about has been announced or teased, so definitely, if you get a chance, go out real quick and just look over all of the JST, Drumforge, etc. kind of socials and get an idea of kind of what's being talked about, and give them a good follow if you haven't already. On to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the True North Audio Podcast. I am your host, Kiko. Joining me today, the man, the myth, the legend, the man of many hats, producer, educator, the master smith in the forges of drums and tones, and presumably owner of one of the very prestigious and sought-after Decker boards, Joey Sturgis. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Do you have a Decker board?
No, I'm afraid that I am not quite as close to Billy unless he's selling them in a store somewhere that I can pick them up.
I think he just makes them. Yeah, I think he pretty much just makes them for people. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is a sought after item, and they're very well made.
I can imagine. As I understand it, he gives them to people that he's worked closely with and has particular respect for. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Billy's a great guy. Great hang too.
I would love to hang out with him. Speaking of the Decker boards, I've been listening to a couple of the other podcasts that you've done recently, and you'd mentioned having kind of a couple things that I think tie into each other. You mentioned mixology as a sort of hobby. Decker board, I think, is a good example of kind of one of Billy's hobbies, and you've also mentioned having kind of non-audio friends, both something that would be in that kind of realm of doing things outside of audio. So I think we can kind of jump into that real fast, since I think the previous host had said that he doesn't really have any non-audio friends, but I do, and I think that's actually something I resonated with pretty much right away, as having people who you can kind of turn off that kind of audio brain conversation with and just be a normal person with, I think.
Yeah.
And the importance of just having hobbies that can do the same thing for you. Being able to turn off that audio brain, as I imagine for you, that's very important for the many, many, many hats you wear.
Yeah. You really have to try and get away from it as much as you can, because you spend so much time in that space. And I found that it's actually really important for the quality of the work and the quality of the decisions that you make. Time away from it. The more time I can get away from it, the better, because the more I hear, and that's hard, because if you're mixing a record or you're producing a record, you have to hear it to do that.
Yeah, it can be pretty all-consuming for sure. But I imagine being able to completely switch out of that mindset when you step back in, I presume, as I know this is the case for me, if I step out, I do something completely else. And when I come back to it, I find that I'm kind of in a different headspace, and I tend to pick up on things that I get a little bit kind of like deaf to while I'm in the process, and that immediately jump out to me. And I feel like the decision making is a lot cleaner that way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's part of my process. I've made sure to surround myself with, engineers and editors and stuff, so that I can even listen to the music less.
Yeah.
So that I could be more objective about the creativity of it. And that's been a very important step in my growth as a producer, just being able to if you're spending days and days focusing on the guitar editing, then you get sort of burnt out, and then you don't want to think about the song creatively anymore, because you put so much brain power on just the edits. But
all the technical stuff just kind of uses up all the RAM.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're looking for people, what is the sort of thing you're looking for? What is the kind of person you want to find, or the kind of mindset you want to find? Because I've heard George Lever, for example, say that he likes to find people who think differently to him and challenge him or teach him things that he's not paying attention to.
Interesting. Um, well, I feel very headstrong about my creative choices.
Mhm.
So I think I'm always looking for someone who can help me get to the result fast or efficiently. So like if
Right.
if I'm like, well, I want to record the drums this way, but that means we're going to have to edit them like this other way. If I find somebody that doesn't push back on that idea, then that's what I'm looking for, right? Cuz
Mhm.
I am very like decisive about how I want things done.
Yeah.
Um, but I also look for people who are like, I guess, arguably better than I am at certain things. For example, I work with a guy named John Eberhard who has done a lot of work himself, like works with like, like Skillet and I Prevail and these bigger rock bands.
Yeah.
And I look to him because he's really a smith with melody and synth and stuff like that. And to me, it's not. I don't get hung up on the sounds of the synths themselves.
Mhm.
It's not that important for me to have to be the person that comes up with the sounds or
Yeah.
whatever. It's more like I'd rather be like the director of like, well, I want a synth part here and I want it to sound sort of dark wavy. And then he's like, he just nails it, so I don't have to be like, okay, let me spend 6 hours trying to get this dark wave thing going. I could just have him do that, and then we tweak it once or twice, and it's done. And that saves me 6 hours of having to hear the song, and also gives me 6 hours back to put into like going down a rabbit hole with vocals or applying that time somewhere else. So yeah, I'm looking for people who basically bring that kind of thing to the table.
Yeah.
And also like someone who is pretty malleable. Like I found that a lot of the people that have helped me, I've helped them. It's in my nature to just be a natural mentor. So like I like to have people that want to learn and want to be instructed, but also want to like basically be mentored. I find that that's a very strong relationship in the creation process.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons that you got in on URM early on? Or
Yeah,
I guess even on Creative Live before that. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, the Creative Live thing was cool because I was just starting to build essentially a software company, and I had such a demand of people wanting to know how I did things.
yeah.
So they really gave me a platform to like both teach how I was doing things, but then also like show off my software, which was great because audio software in the end is a tool for other music creators to use to create music with as well.
Yeah.
And this idea of like, you know, gatekeeping and holding secrets. And, you know, I felt like that is a very closed minded way of leaving a legacy. I wanted to
Yeah.
basically be like, I wanted to pass the torch. I wanted to be a part of the bigger picture, which is like sharing this creative process, sharing these ideas of how to create art is more interesting than the art itself in terms of legacy. And so, of course, I'm going to build an education company, a platform to help people learn how to mix and get closer to their art and create tools that help people do that too. Like
Yeah.
I just find that being so much more fulfilling than like helping 5 dudes go on tour and make a 10-song album every year or whatever, right? It's there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to talk about. It goes deeper. And I find myself being that kind of person in general. Like that's why I like mixology. It never ends. It just
Hmm.
a new combination of flavors, a new drink, a new way to garnish something, a new technique. Like I just learned how to carbonate any cocktail
Oh,
with
wow.
a special device that I have now. And yeah, so I love like things that challenge you, and I love things that have really deep rabbit holes, and so that's why that's here I am.
I absolutely relate to that. Yeah, I think the whole secret keeping it's a bit at odds with the whole actually trying to give people those tools for writing and creating music. It seems like it's a little here's something, but not everything. You're leaving a little too much on the table for sure. And I think personally, I think URM is awesome too, because it's one of those things that I feel like in the time that URM has been around, because I've been in since 2016. I joined like month 5, I think.
Oh wow.
But yeah, I've been in for a long time. I've gotten to watch it grow, and I absolutely evangelize the community. I feel like URM has really stepped up the production game on the whole, and I think it's been a great place for people to share ideas and challenge each other. And I think that in a lot of ways that elevates the whole community, which personally I'm all about. I love being able to learn from people, and I think that the education rabbit hole is one of those things that never it will never bottom out, honestly.
Well, and mixing is such a vast art form that, and it's continuously changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, this was kind of our only way of figuring out how to even teach it. Was like, it has to be like a community. It has to be a discussion. It has to be new things every month, because you make this. You make a bunch of video courses. Here's how EQ works. Here's how compression works, or whatever. But like, that's not really like the way that you learn creatively. Yes, you need to know some of that information in order to use those tools, but it still doesn't teach you how to mix. So, it was a challenge to put it together, but I think once we landed on the format and we figured it out that this is something that would be repeatable and is something that can continuously keep up with the trends and the changes of the art form itself, then we realized, all right, we really have something that we can scale and build. And that's been an exciting challenge. And, there's new things on the way that I can't dive too deep into the details, but it's just
little tease.
Little tease there, but URM is about to change in a really cool way. It's going to be even more helpful for people. And yeah, we're always just trying to make it the best it can be. And that's a fun, it's a fun thing to be a part of. I really do have like one of the most fun jobs out there, I think. And I try not to take that for granted.
Yeah. I mean, I can't argue with that at all. I think that URM is also one of those things that, one of the things that stands out about it, like you were saying, being able to get that keeping up with the times. I think one thing that's really cool about it is because you get a different mentor every month and you have that whole community, you get a chance to see that it's not kind of a hard rules, one size fits all sort of thing. You get to see guys kind of do things other guys might never think of, or even just do things that other guys would do completely different. Since, as we've seen, you give the same multi-tracks to 500 different people and you're going to get 500 different mixes. Even if people are sitting there watching every single move and using the same plugins, it seems like you still, whatever it is about your ear, your experience, or your little touch, it's going to still come out differently from the other guy who's doing it.
Yep. And I think there's actually like a lesson within there, which is, 1 month, one guy says this thing about bass, and the next month, the guy says something that completely contradicts it. And it's like, that is the lesson, is that like, there is no right way to mix something. It's just the way that you mix it. And, fortunately for a lot of music fans, there's people who are able to find a combination that really work together.
Yeah. I mean, it completely changed my way of thinking with mixing entirely. And I know that's true of a lot of my friends who've stuck around with it.
I have learned a lot from Nail the Mix as well, but I've also been able to, distance myself from letting it influence me too deeply. Because I like to try and keep some of that, original decision-making mentality that I've just, because I'm still that kid from the garage that just figured it out through trial and error, and I don't want to like ever lose that. So sometimes when I watch what people are doing, I just I'm like, I hope I forget that. Yeah, it's very cool to see everyone sharing all their different techniques. And and every once in a while, you get somebody to do something that kind of makes waves throughout the community. I remember the Wade Gate was kind of a cool eye opener. So I like those moments as well. And how else do you create that? It's got to be the way. URM is just the only place where I think that this kind of thing can happen. So
Yeah.
it's really fun to be a part of.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'll evangelize it. I've got so many people to join that you guys ended up bringing one of them onto your team. Definitely swear by it. I think oh man, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Ooh, wow, that thought disappeared completely.
Brain fart.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I guess if it comes back, I'll bring it. I'll bring it back up. But another thing that you do, of course, is like you said earlier, you do the plugins, you do the drum samples, and all that stuff. And you've been doing, if I understand right, you'd been doing the drum samples before you really had like the site or the company. And I think you said you'd even been giving them away. I know, like my buddy Steve from Blades of Fane was saying he had some like really old ones you were selling on your website way back in the day. I think before it was a company or before it was like separate to just Joey Sturgis, the producer. But what
Yeah.
kind of?
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask what kind of got you into that.
Yeah. So like the story, and I've told it like a few times, but the story really is just I was making drum samples for myself, and this is back when I don't know why, but I just didn't figure out that you should just record drums last.
Hmm.
um, but like I would record drums first, and so it created a bunch of problems with that mentality or that method. Like basically,
Yeah,
if you record drums first and then you figure out, oh, we should
change the
elongate this
riff.
part or change this fill, like okay, that creates a situation. So I would do sampling first, then I would get the drummer to play all the songs, record all those, and then edit. And then if we're somewhere later down the line, we want to change something, we have those drum samples to be able to build new drum parts without having to re-record the drums or
Yeah.
have the drummer play it again.
Did
And
you build them? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I built them. I was, for those of you that don't know, I have a background in like software engineering and computer science, like from high school. I was really into that, just self learner, taught myself how to program. Like, so naturally, I figured out how to make contact instruments for myself. So yeah, I would do that. Like, and it was kind of crazy. Like, I would do it every record. So that's make
It's
it,
a lot of work every record.
yeah. Like, not only am I making the record, but I'm also making a sample instrument per record. Like, it was
Yeah.
kind of nuts. And because of that, it really dawned on me that like, okay, that instrument's now going to sit on that hard drive forever and never get touched, and it could be utilized.
Yeah.
So that's when I came up with the idea to create Joey Sturgis Drums, which would be a website where you could come and purchase those samplers or those sample kits, and that did pretty well. And then a year goes by and you've done like $30,000 in sales or something, and you're like, oh, this is how I can like make more money because I'm maxed
Yeah.
out. I can only do 10 records a year. So how do I make more money? Oh, I sell stuff to other people. And also part of that was people coming in the studio and being like wanting to know how I'm doing stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
like, you're in the band. I'm not going to tell you how I do stuff, but after like that repeating itself over and over and over again, every band always having like one or two people who want to like record and learn about the sample and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, this is not something that I can really prevent. Like I
Yeah.
have to find a way to go with this. And that's before I had the fulfillment of mentoring people or giving away the secrets, right? I wasn't there
Mhm.
yet. So I think part of my journey of getting to that place was, like selling the drum samples, selling the guitar tones was part of me figuring out that actually I like to give this stuff to other users. That's part of me becoming a mentor and wanting to pass the torch. So
Yeah.
it all sort of led to that. It all started with the drum samples, which led to selling guitar tones like the Pod Farm presets, which then leads to making your first plugin, making your own guitar tone plugin.
Mhm.
The trajectory becomes clearer the more and more that you do.
You get in that rabbit hole mindset again.
Exactly.
You start like, okay, I got this, but what can I do to do more, make it bigger, make it more my thing, or do the thing that I don't like differently, or whatever.
Yeah. And really approaching this is the bigger bird's eye view idea. The bigger idea is problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, making a record is problem solving, making a business is problem solving, making tools to solve problems. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. That's what I am interested in, and I think it's what I bring to the table in terms of like being a business owner, being a creator. So I've used that skill set like in every way that I could possibly think of how to basically use it. And I think that it's conducive to my journey because I don't think URM would exist if it weren't for my ability to just figure out how to solve those problems. Like, how do you make a website where you can give people
Drum samples.
the stems, right? Or yeah, or the stems,
Yeah. Yeah.
or like, how do we convince these record labels to not think that we're ripping them off, or like, how do we,
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of challenging problem solving scenarios, and I just have a blast with that.
And I can only imagine how many problems come up with something like that. You have so many moving parts, and every month it changes.
Yeah, it is. I don't think people would ever fully wrap their head around what it takes to create and run what we do. But we've been given the time to go down that path and figure that out.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you're gonna have to change with the market. I mean, there's a lot of change happening in the audio industry right now.
Oh yeah.
So it's fun to navigate, and I think that, like I was saying earlier, one of the reasons why I like music production or why I like mixology or whatever is that it does challenge you. So business is another pillar of that. I love building a business. It's one of the most challenging things that you can do with your time.
Yeah.
I feel like I would never be able to retire because then I wouldn't know
What
what
to
to
do
be
with
challenged
yourself.
by. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have something, anything.
Yep.
With the like Toneforge and everything, another thing I've been kind of curious about is you talked about again on one of the other ones, the white box and black box with making the amp sims. And I'm not a programmer. I can make like really basic contact interface and stuff like that. But I got kind of an understanding. I'm just curious though with the like neural networking, neural learning and stuff. It seems like the sort of thing that you would kind of have to you only get like a snapshot of kind of one setting of an amp if you're trying to kind of model it. I wonder how granular you actually have to get with something like that. I've always been curious about that.
Yeah, so machine learning requires training data, and you have to have a wide set of data, or yeah, basically a lot of data
Hmm.
to train with in order to get more of an accurate recreation of it. So instead of having just a snapshot,
Yeah.
like you're saying, like being able to have like a more of a 3-dimensional or even maybe a 99.9% like recreation, reverse engineered recreation of the thing you're trying to model. That only happens from a lot of data.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're dealing with time. So if you want to make like a perfect match, let's say, and I'm just going to use like just specific numbers so that we can talk about it from that point of view.
Hmm.
Let's say to get a perfect match to your ears, it requires 8 hours of training or 8 hours of music, but then using the 8 hours of music to train with actually takes more time because there's processing loops. So now you've added on like multiple layers of timing that goes into it. And then the resulting match might also take some time to get perfect.
Hmm.
So, even though it can be talked about at the surface level of like, oh, it's really cool. It's like, no, it can still take, a considerable amount of time and training to even get close.
Yeah.
And I think that what's what it's really going to come down to is how people get creative with this stuff. Because if you're just doing it like mindlessly, like if you're just being
Hmm.
mindless about it, like let me just like, yeah, I'll just do the training and then there's the match. Well, if you use your ears, you're going to be like, oh, that's got too much bottom end. I wonder what happened there.
Yeah.
So it's really going to come down to the combination of using your own creative ability to diagnose those problems, but also how to use the technology creatively as well. Like not just
Yeah.
using the technology for what it was created for. Kind of like how producers will talk about like, oh, this plugin is supposed to be for vocals, but I use it on bass or
Hmm.
whatever, right? So like that's kind of like how I think the technology is going to be better utilized is
Yeah.
when you find something like this neural network tone matching technique, you find something like that, but you find your own creative way to use it so that you can like still combine it with white box modeling technology to create like tones faster or something. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
it's not a perfect, the whole topic is not a perfect science yet.
Yeah.
Like you can't just be like, okay, well, we don't need a human resource person anymore. We'll just use Chat GPT. It's
Yeah.
like, no, Chat GPT can write letters, but you still have to like
Deal with the nuance of human emotion.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there really is no way for it to take over yet. And frankly, I think its only value that it has is that it can just be used to assist you,
Yeah.
at least for now. So yeah, we can create a faithful remodel of like a JCM, a modded JCM 800, but it's a combination of ear work, training with neural networks, and tweaking by hand. Like that's part of that secret sauce that's like I don't think is going to go away.
Yeah.
And Kempers can only take things so far as well, right? So I think it's an interesting time period to see how people are going to use AI in product creation as well as using AI in music production.
Yeah.
And that's we're there. It's happening. It's here. It's right now.
I think it's one of those things too where it's the difference between knowing how a tool works and knowing how to break the tool in an interesting way.
Yes, breaking stuff is what I'm into.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been breaking ChatGPT since it came out, which is fun. And so we're trying to find ways of how that works in our product creation process as well.
Hmm.
Like, for example, our programmer uses this thing called Copilot, which basically will help you, like as a programmer, helps you do stuff that is just mundane and doesn't require creativity or skill.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, hey, like take these 10 strings and write an algorithm that randomly sorts them based on these rules, and then it just will write the code so that now the programmer doesn't have to spend time on that because that's maybe a portion of a piece of software that we need, but
Yeah.
we don't need to utilize him to create that. Like any robot that understands the instructions can do that part, but the thing we need him to do is to figure out like what is the holistic process of going from here's some stems from my third album, which we have a tone on there from Andy Sneap, and we want to figure out how to like reverse engineer that tone. Okay,
Yeah.
now we're going to need a human brain on that, some ears on that, as well as some machine learning technology. We're going to need a bunch of things to figure that out.
You
But
want something that can analyze the harmonic series, but you want someone who can listen to it and go say, "Hey, this kind of sounds like shit."
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you don't need and conversely, you don't need a robot, or sorry, you don't need a human to do a robot's job. So it's
Yeah.
right now like AI is it's such a cool thing to actually have it like helping and assisting, but it's definitely nowhere near being able to just write plugins for you, or you're
Yeah.
not going to sit there and start a plugin company just by writing prompts into Chat GPT. So
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? No, I was very curious since it sounded like you'd been working with white and black box. As you mentioned somewhere at some point that you kind of you can always kind of just do the we're going to create another like 1176 or whatever, but the idea of creating a good plugin is not about just copying what already exists or trying to faithfully recreate it, but trying to take what exists, take what people like about it, and adapt it into something better than it was before or more useful in the setting that you're building it in.
I've always found that idea of emulation to really, I mean, there's part of it that makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
it's great if you can have 30 JCM 800s inside your mix, and not have to sit there and actually run it through the amp to reamp it
30
to record
times.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. But
Yeah.
emulation never made sense to me from a product standpoint because I always thought I don't know what 1176 is or does or how it's supposed to sound. I've never touched a real one, so why would I buy an emulated one when I don't even understand what it is? I felt
Yeah.
like that was the inner monologue of the users that I was making products for. So all they're going off of is legends, like whatever people say, the historical story or the legendary story of, oh yeah, Michael Jackson used an SM7B going into a blah blah blah. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. But is that like, have you recorded anybody that sounds like Michael Jackson? Because
Yeah.
probably doesn't work for anybody else, really. you know?
Yeah. I mean, just like the whole thing with everybody, 500 people's the same multis. It's there's more to it than just the hardware.
Yeah. So when I had the chance or the opportunity to create tools, I wanted to do my own way of making these processors and create my own
Yeah.
DSP. So almost everything, I would say, yeah, almost everything that we've built as our own DSP. We're not licensing DSP from anybody.
Hmm.
We built all this stuff from scratch. So our compression routines, like our saturation circuits, all the code that goes into that stuff is homemade, home brewed,
Yeah.
and I think that is what's better, at least for me, and what's cool about JST is that all of our products are solution based and all the DSP is in house. Now we're starting to get into some areas now where I don't think we're going to be able to keep it that way. Like we definitely want to start incorporating some kind of pitch manipulation in some of our
Hmm.
software, and that really requires some very you'd have to spin your wheels on that for a few years to get pretty far to where the state of the art is. I mean, there's a white paper on multi pitch tracking, uh, monophonic versus the polyphonic pitch tracking, and it's
Yeah.
like 172 pages. So like you know like it's a lot of work, and there's already so many companies out there that have like pitch tracking technologies. Either they licensed it or they built it years ago,
Yeah.
and so for us to catch up, like we really just probably have to jump ahead and go ahead and grab a license or something like that, because that's
Yeah.
a technology that takes a lot of time to approach. And I think a lot of people really don't understand. You have your guitar players online bitching about how it doesn't pick up the chords right. And it's like, yeah, but do you realize that this is a problem that science hasn't figured out yet? Like,
It's a big one for sure. Yeah.
so yeah, that's the tough part of being in our scenario is we can only make so many basic tools before we have to start, before you have to get into the more advanced stuff. And
Yeah.
when you get into that stuff, it gets real advanced real fast,
I mean, I guess one way to think about it is that you're basically kind of in the same way you're hiring the engineer to take care of the edits. You're hiring somebody who's done the work for you to free up that brain RAM and just let you focus on the next step you're trying to do.
I mean, anything that's great requires collaboration.
Yeah.
I really believe in that. So,
Yeah.
having a really good team, creating a culture where that team can thrive, and also creating a way for people within your organization to grow is like everything. Because without that, like you're just sort of doing a job for some other person or for some other entity. And I don't think that people can really find much meaning in that.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Apparently, Zoom ended the whole call when it ended that recording on my end, though. So you were saying when it dropped, you were talking about just having a good team and creating a good collaborative environment and
Yeah, and
just overall empowering your team.
giving your team the ability to grow within your organization as well. Like, if you're a video editor in our team, like we want you to get really good at video editing. And if you're a video editor, I would assume that you want to be good at video editing as well. So we try to
Yeah.
do everything we can to like give you the resources and the time and the anything to get better at that. and also creating that, relationship with each other in your team to lift each other up and to
Hmm.
support each other to grow in those skills. And so yeah, I take all that stuff super seriously, and I think that's one of the reasons why the stuff we make is great, because
Yeah.
everybody is a part of it. Everybody feels like they're not just working for someone else; they're building something together. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes it anything great. And yeah,
Getting a chance to give everybody a little piece of that victory, something they can be proud of just as much as you are, not just something they can say, "Oh yeah, that was a cool project I did on that yeah, on that Monday or whatever." Something they
yeah,
can
yeah,
take pride in and share with people.
absolutely, yeah. That's like vital, and it doesn't happen on every project either. Like, there's
Yeah.
definitely projects that we do sometimes where like some members of our team are like, I'm not really excited by this, and it's like that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as the overall sort of vibe, the overall experience is one of growth and collaboration.
Yes.
And of course, a very important question: when are we getting the official release of the desucculator?
That might be coming sooner than you think, actually. The desucculator. That was a fun little. We have a this year we have an epic April Fool's joke that I am so I'm so stoked.
Oh, I
I'm
can't
so
wait.
excited about it. Yeah.
I can't wait.
I think it is going to confuse some people. So that I'm still trying to think of like how to make sure people understand the joke, but it's a good one. So yeah, look out for that April 1st.
I'm excited. Yeah, I love that. I'm one of the people who got the desucculator at some point when it was on sale, and I still have it, and I'm holding on to it. But
Oh,
part of the
nice.
reason, in some way, part of the reason I asked is you guys just dropped that more recent the drum bus glue plugin that was the kind of like I'm trying to. I don't actually know. Did you update anything on it, or is it just the same one from the Ultimate Drum Production?
Oh, I think it's the same one. Yeah. There's a couple times where we've needed something like some kind of bonus or some kind of extra,
Mm-hmm.
piece to provide value to the offer, So every once in a
Yeah.
while that either becomes like extra drum samples or maybe a plugin that wasn't released or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the same one I think you're talking about.
I got that one with Ultimate Drum Production, along with the like Drumforge plugin, the exclusive sample set, which is also really awesome.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed it and I liked it, and I could never really give it to my friends because it was with the course, or anytime I'm like, you guys gotta get. Well, I guess you're gonna have to get one of the other drum glue, bus glue drum plugins. They're good too, but you guys, if you want this one, I guess you'll have to get Ultimate Drum Production when it's out. So I am happy that people can just pick that up now. That one specifically.
Yeah, it's tough because you never really know like what plugins are going to pop off and which ones aren't.
Yeah.
Like, I have the ones that I think would be amazing ideas, and then like people, I don't know, they just might not be into it. So like,
Hmm.
Demon Fuzz is like a perfect example of like, I don't know if you guys realize or not, but that plugin is amazing. Like I use it for sound design and effects all the time, and
Yeah.
the fact that you can like do the whole gating thing, the gating trick with the saturation circuit is like everything,
Yeah.
and so, but then that plugin is never sold well. Like,
Sometimes you have an idea of what it is and people just haven't seen that vision yet.
yeah, yeah, that's been kind of part of our thing now, is that now that we have like a really big content marketing team, I've been trying to show
Yeah.
why the plugins are badass, like because I didn't
Yeah.
get the opportunity to explain it when we launched it or whatever, right? So just trying to create those Instagram posts or those YouTube videos that like open your eyes into like what the tool could do, to kind of help people understand why it would be a useful thing for them to have in their toolkit.
Absolutely. You got Miami on that now too. I've got friends now who know who he is who have no context of URM. which is funny to me. The important question, is Miami Dolphin his real name? Have you seen his ID?
I have, and it is actually his real name. I know I don't want to. This is his story to tell, so I won't tell it. But I know the story behind his name as well, and
Oh boy.
it's interesting. So yeah, that's his real name, his birth name. He struggles with that pretty much every day of his life. So
I feel like anytime he asked a question on the URM podcast, it was always his introduction. In my head, it is now canon that his full name on his ID is Miami Dolphin. Yes, that's his real name. I've seen his ID.
yeah, that's funny. That's like his last name is the whole sentence.
It's just all hyphenated out, or even it's just one run-on sentence, like some of those old, like the 2009 kind of metalcore names or whatever, just one sentence names.
Yeah, that's funny.
So where did you going early on? How did you end up? Since listening again to one of the previous podcasts, you had mentioned how you didn't really think about getting into music. You were doing the programming thing, and music kind of just happened. The production thing kind of just happened. So early on, how did you end up networking and meeting all the people who would kind of build that career and make you Joey Sturgis?
It took years of time to get to the point where I'm recording like The Devil Wears Prada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of started with like, first it was like, okay, record my own band. I'm the drummer, so
Right.
I can record my own band, and then that goes up on MySpace. Then you have a band in Dayton, Ohio. They were called Winter of Discontent, and they heard that demo, and they were like, "We want to record with you guys." So Winter of Discontent drives over to Connorsville, Indiana, records with
Mm-hmm.
me. They go and put that up on their MySpace. Then another band hears that and goes, "I want to record where you guys recorded." Then Winter of Discontent is like, "Yeah, we went recorded with this dude in Connorsville. Here's his email or whatever." And like you can see where that's going. And over
Yeah.
time that just got to the point where it happened for me. Like it happened without me, literally. It just
Mm-hmm.
was people hearing it and wanting to come and do it. And
Yeah.
so, and that all happened with like the tri-state area. So it was a lot of bands from Ohio, some bands from Illinois, some bands from Indiana, Kentucky, and then it starts to get into you have bands coming from Michigan, bands coming from Tennessee, and just like over the years, like it just spreads.
Yeah.
Now you've got Asking Alexandria flying in from England, and you've got some Japanese. Like I worked on a Japanese record and had a translator. like
Oh, that must have been nuts.
so, yeah. Like the whole thing just kind of happened pretty quickly. But the networking was really the key part. Was the word of mouth, and also just getting the attention of the right bands at the right time. Like I remember
Yeah.
one of the first records I really did that kind of like sealed the deal for my manager was this Before Their Eyes record, because I think at the time I had done like The Devil Wears Prada, and I did like maybe At the Throne of Judgment, or maybe Miss May I, or one of those types of bands, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was like Before Their Eyes, and then I think that's when Craig had been like, all right, this kid's like up to something, and I want to be, I want to help him out and be a part of it, and I want to be his manager. So, he reached out to me and was like, I love your work, and I think that you're doing something really cool here, and I
Yeah.
want to help, I want to be your manager. So I was just like, no, I don't want a manager, especially not a manager that like, I guess I kind of looked at it as a catch-22. It was like a good thing that he ran a label, because I'm sure he had like contacts and could send me infinite bands.
Yeah.
But I also was like, but you own a record label, and like record labels pay me, and like that just seems like it could be sticky. So at first I was
Yeah.
not into the idea, but kind of talked me into it. And that ended up being like really one of the most important decisions I made in my whole career, because that alliance with Craig and his timing on his journey to level himself up, I was a part of that, and he was a part of me leveling up too. So together we kind of built Rise Records along with some other really talented producers and bands too. But you know,
Yeah.
his confidence in my ability was immense because it he bought me a house, and I paid him back for it, but it took, he was willing to, because I didn't have any credit. So
Right. Right.
when it came time to like lose the studio, because the person I was renting it from literally just didn't want to rent it out anymore, it was like, where am I going to record? I've got all these records I need to do. And
Yeah.
he literally just never met me before, by the way. We've only talked on the phone and on email, and he just out of nowhere, this guy from Portland or from Oregon, I don't know if it was Portland, but from Oregon, is like buying this kid from Connorsville like a house. And
That's a
but
lot of
yeah,
trust too. I
it's a
mean,
lot of trust.
that's a very good relationship you got going on there, that he's willing to put that kind of investment in you.
I think it was also kind of strategic for him because
Yeah.
he did see the impact that I was creating with my productions, and I think that he needed that as a part of what he was trying to build, which was like
Hmm.
Rise Records. So
You could kind of sell each other a little bit. 'Cause that was around the time I was in high school, and I remember listening to all those bands. All my friends are listening to all those bands, and I mean, your name and Rise Records were all over. Everyone was talking about it, and I remember that Asking Alexandria was a funny one too, because I remember seeing an interview with them ages and ages ago off that first record, I think, where the interviewer asked about you and asked about working with you, and they were talking about doing the like pod, the line 6 thing, and actually just like plugging the guitars right into the computer. And 'cause at the time, I mean, everybody's still so used to the analog world, and they're working with this crazy dude who's like running your pedals just straight into the DAW. And I
yeah,
remember how much that blew my mind. Because my old roommate at the time tried doing the same thing, but he was just like lying in of his Boss pedals straight into the mic in on the computer or whatever, and it sounded terrible. And we had no idea how you made it sound good, and we couldn't. But
hold on, let me get my dog. Come here.
oh yeah, you're good.
Be quiet, buddy. Yeah, one of my favorite tricks that I came up with was because I was so like I hated the idea of like trying to record real amps, but there were some bands that were like inflexible on that. Like they were like, yeah,
Right.
it has to be our amp or whatever. And the part of it that I didn't like, it had nothing really to do with the amp. It was just all the rest of it, like the cab and the mic and the preamp and all that stuff. I didn't have the patience to get that mic at the right spot. And then like when
Yeah.
it is in the right spot, you have to hope it stays there. So
Yeah. Oh, I've had
my
that experience.
my trick was to basically use the effects send and put that into the DAW. So you record basically the raw sound of the amp, not going through a
Yeah.
cab.
Yeah.
Your cab becomes your dummy. So you have a place to put the load. And then you just put an impulse response or even a cab simulator on that raw amp sound. And then boom, you've got a consistent tone.
Yeah.
And I did that like a number of times.
It's definitely before that was a normal thing to do. Like I said, that blew a lot of our minds just hearing stuff like that. 'Cause, I mean, a lot of my friends listened to all those bands and looked up to you. You were one of the early names I remember when I started getting into production that everybody like really wanted to emulate. It was like you were the guy who was kind of shaking things up, and otherwise everyone wanted to be like Sukoff or Adam D or one of the Sneap or someone like that.
Yeah.
But I remember you felt like kind of the new guy who's really shaking things up and doing stuff that shouldn't work, and proving that we were entering into a new era. And I think that inspired a lot of my friends who were trying to record in their bedrooms. And I think that it's actually really cool seeing that eventually grew to URM and stuff like that, where we could learn all that and learn from people that we were looking up to at that time.
Yeah, the experience that I had was that I tried the traditional stuff and I couldn't make it sound good. I tried
Hmm.
miking up a cab, a 4x12, and like it would, to me, it just didn't sound like the records that I liked, even though I know those
Yeah.
records were put together a certain way. Like, I was a big Andy Sneap fan. So to hear his guitar tones was kind of like, you you try to do the same thing that he's been known to do, and then
Yeah.
it just sounds like ass, and it's like, all right, I think I just have to find my own way to do this, and that's, thankfully the timing was right. It was, you had the rack mount pod, or the pod beam came out, and
Oh man.
the thing with that is that it was like kind of linear, right? So like you turn the knobs a certain way and you save that, and then the next day you can recall that. You can get that exact same position of all those knobs and then move the knobs a little bit more and then recall
Mm-hmm.
that. And you iterate on that for a number of times, and you eventually get to the point where you're like, oh, this is the tone. Like, this is
Yeah.
version 7 of the tone. Like that's the one I like.
Yeah.
There's way more variables doing that in the analog world. And so it takes longer. And I think just being able to tweak and tweak and tweak and recall was that was like what I needed to be able to, and that's what I needed to be able to figure it out. And this plays into a joke I always say. People will be like, why don't you do like live sounds? I'd be like, because I need to hear the kick drum for like 4 hours before I get it right. Like, tweaking the EQ like over and over. I need lots of second chances here. Whereas
Yeah.
live, you've got 10 minutes to get the thing to sound right, and then the show's over and that's it. So
Oh, live sounds such a different monster. That's where I started. I got into it kind of like what you were talking about, produce your own band, and in my head is like, oh, I'll save money on studio time or whatever. But of course, I took a great deal of time to learn that live and in the studio were also two very, very different skill sets and different kind of sounds and stuff.
right.
But yeah, no, I think that in some ways, though, that's your advantage. Everybody has their own kind of way of working. I mean, you talked about Joel at some point, and I mean, he's definitely like an in the box, out of the box kind of flipping back and forth. I have the same experience with Toby. I talk to him every 6 months. He's somewhere between I'm buying all the amps I want. I got all these new cabs I'm looking at, and I think I'm going to sell all my amps. I love all the amp sims. I don't think I'm ever going to use a live amp again.
Well, yeah, the technology's come far,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
and now that we're talking about white box, black box, neural network, machine learning, all this, and the fact that you can do it in real time is really the thing that was missing. Not the training, but the
Yeah. Yeah.
inference. Yeah, and so now it's a whole new it's a whole new ball game. I mean, we're about to see the impact that this is going to have. I mean, you're going to see literally faithful recreations of famous gear. Being able to have Chris Lord-Alge's exact, even his channels. You could machine learn on every channel and get channel 1, which is going to be different than channel 40. You know,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
have a virtual console.
Well, I mean, I feel like neural networking combined with the kind of early stages of the like quantum computing, I'm fascinated by the kind of things you're going to get out of that as well. The really, really fast computers. I've thought, like in sample making terms, I do that. I've thought it'd be very interesting if you could get kind of a quantum computer and do the same thing where you kind of break the software. But I imagine like, what if you could create a program that creates like drum samples, but you can mess with the variables in ways that are not possible in the physical world? Like build a drum that has a fractal shell of some kind
Right.
and figure out like how a fractal drum sounds, or a drum that has like a gold shell, and kind of hear how, the physics of gold is going to sound, or something ridiculous like that, trying to do stuff that you're not going to be able to do in a room. But yeah, I can imagine that being able to get the very, very, very specific details of any piece of gear is just going to get easier and easier.
Yeah. Especially if you are smart about how you break it down. I think, we're going to see a lot of this. Unfortunately, I think the bigger problem is going to be how noisy it's going to be. But And
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
I say noisy, I mean it's just going to be like saturated, market saturation to the
Yeah.
nines. But
Yeah.
hopefully there will be a way to uh, lean on your branding, I guess,
Hmm.
or just the way that you provide it. Because from a competitive standpoint, I look at it as like it's been the Pandora's box is opened. It's
Yeah.
like anybody that knows how to program C++ and has access to the Juice framework, which is only like $300 a month or something.
Yeah.
Now, and there's open source neural networks and all this stuff. Like you can make anything. So that the thing
Yeah.
that scares me about that is that it's just like now it's going to be very challenging to have all of that all of that competition out there. So the branding is what really is going to be the differential. For example, if you're a prestigious brand, you probably have access to more collaboration. So I can go
Yeah.
work on a project with Jeff Loomis, um,
Yeah. Or Matt Greiner.
right? And so that's the thing that AI can't help you.
Yeah.
So I try to lean on the fact that as long as we're working on cool projects that people really want to pay attention to, then that's like our lane.
Yeah.
But then there's
Yeah.
other companies, like Isotope, who like really push the technology forward and come up with new ways to integrate AI into products and to make them useful for users, and that's their lane. Like,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily known for creating a product with like a famous person, but more so creating a new technology that people want to use. So
Yeah.
I'd like to get our organization closer to that, where we're developing our own technology that people find useful. And that's this new project that is coming out next week is exactly that. We've created some stuff that we think is going to help change how guitar tone works in the future, and it is our own technology.
Very cool. Got anything you can say about that?
Well,
What secrets are out or not?
yeah, so like I'm not going to reveal what it is, but I could tell you like the basis for it. So basically, like the problem with amp simulators or guitar tone plugins in general is that there's still a variable that nobody can control, and that's your guitar.
Hmm.
And so you plug in a 6-string Fender Strat into a JCM 800, you're going to get sort of a intended result, because
Yeah.
that's kind of maybe what the manufacturer used when they were designing the amp and tweaking it. So now you've got a world of 8-string guitars tuned in drop F trying to play through a JCM 800 that was designed for E standard, right? So
Yeah.
what does
Yeah.
that look like? Are there benefits to changing the circuitry to support the lower frequencies? How does that look? And how do you interface with the software to let it know what kind of guitar you're playing? And also, um, even from guitar to guitar, the sound is going to change. Like from
Yeah.
the same model, like you could have 3 guitars right next to each other, all with the same strings, the same pickups, and they can sound different.
Yeah.
So there's a technology that we've come up with that kind of helps deal with that situation, and it it's really fun to use.
That sounds really cool.
I can get sounds now that like just would be impossible unless I had your guitar, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really going to open up the playground for guitar tone creation and guitar tone mixing. Um, and I'm proud of the technology, and I think people are going to be interested in it.
I think that's awesome. I'm really excited to see what it is. That sounds really promising.
Yeah.
Now, have you go on?
I was going to say, if for anyone listening and they want to know what I'm talking about, just follow us on Instagram. That's where we're going to announce it.
Follow on all the sites. Follow
Yeah.
everything. Just keep up. Some
Yeah.
great products. I mean, I mentioned Matt Greiner earlier. That's I picked that one up here like what, a month ago. That's been one of my kind of new favorite drum samples to play with. I like the use of the left and right hand. I feel like that's something that gets overlooked a lot, but personally I found like whenever I was sampling, I always found that as much as you don't think it's going to, the difference between the left and right hand, even on the same, drum piece, is going to sound different a lot of the time. It's completely,
Oh, it's absolutely different.
yeah, you're shocked. You're shocked how much of a difference it makes. And I'm glad that it actually takes that into consideration. I mean, if it sounded the same, we wouldn't have all these, marching rudiments. That wouldn't be a thing. Nobody would care about paradiddles and double stroke rolls.
Well, the other part of it too is like, that's what you're hearing on a record. Like if you're recording a record like of August Burns Red, you're going to
Yeah.
hear the hits being different because they're being played by different hands, and that
Yeah.
factors into like if you have a kid or an aspiring producer who doesn't have access to the Atrium Audio Studio and wants to create a record that sounds like that, well, you can't because the drum samples that you're using are all the same hand or they're the same hits or whatever.
Yeah.
Being able to like change innovate on the product side is part of the cool thing of the mission is like
Yeah.
bringing that power to people. Like that was another part of the whole Drumforge scenario was like, let's give people the ability to change the microphones in the box. Like,
Yeah.
Pick the hands that are hitting the drum at the moment of this part in the song. Like, cause that contributes a large portion to the sound. And that's the piece that's missing for a lot of people that are making records at home. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those little things add up very quickly. I know Spitfire Audio has talked in the past about how, one thing they always noticed was that imperfection is sometimes the thing that makes the samples sound good. It's like the thing you're missing is actually the things that are done slightly wrong in some ways. The way that the width of a guitar is made from the fact that the two performances on either side are not exactly identical, or the kind of big sound of a synth is by detuning the oscillators from each other. And I like the way that paying attention to those little things can really elevate whatever you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Do you watch or have you come across any of Jim Lill's videos? He does videos doing like, where does the tone come from in a guitar? Where does the sound of a cabinet come from? Why does an amp sound the way it does? Have you seen any of those?
No, I have not.
Oh, they are very interesting. So Jim is not a scientist. He's just a dude who plays guitar, kind of started trying to figure out where the sound comes from and how to get the sounds he wants. But what he'll do is he'll go through the kind of scientific process. He'll like get guitar cabinets and he'll try a couple of ones that he already knows and he'll start changing variables and he'll take this experiment to quite the extreme to determine what is making the most difference in every piece of the chain. And then at the end of the video, he'll apply whatever his kind of experience and his research has given him to some kind of ridiculous product or some kind of ridiculous like experimental thing that shouldn't work but does in some way or another. And I think it's a really fascinating watch because it really does kind of make you think about what you think matters and what really does matter. And it's got me like thinking about guitar tone completely differently these days.
That's the tough part is that I do think there's like some mystery around guitar tone that still persists and it's absolutely not true. Like the whole idea of like, oh, I like the way that it feels like while I'm playing it in real time. It's like, well, the only thing that can change there is the amount of time that it takes for the latency, the round trip latency of the sound to come back out of your speakers. There's no, no one's sitting around writing software that changes the feel of the sound while you're playing it live.
Yeah.
So using that as like a measuring metric or some sort of like critiquing thing to compare software to doesn't make any sense. Yeah. They're all low latency. They all have the same turnaround time. It depends on your buffer rate. So yeah, like that's the thing that cracks me up. But I mean, I get it. You're talking about how it makes you feel while you're playing, and that's a valid thing. but that there is nothing that no company can do better than the other to make that different. Like you you either return the audio sample at the right time or you don't. It's just like, so
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever had any issues where you'll create a tone and people just end up getting kind of upset because it's not how it sounds for them for whatever reason because of
yeah, that's
any piece of their chain?
that's it. That's the variable part that our
Yeah.
technology tackles. And that's another thing too. Like, you see this in situations where like you work with an artist like Jason Richardson, for example, and he's got these
Hmm.
amazing guitars, but then the people that are using the software don't have amazing guitars. So
Yeah.
like um there's a huge gap there in terms of understanding like your a lot of people famously said that plugin has too much low end, but what kind of guitar are you using?
Yeah.
Um
Well, I think of AL when he's talking about when they did the, I want to say Axe effects or Kemper profiles for John on the Monuments record. And people are coming back like, doesn't sound like Monuments. Like, these are exactly the presets we used. We have changed nothing.
yeah, yeah.
But, they're not Monuments. They're not John. They don't sound exactly like him. I
It's your
had,
hand too. Yeah, the hand
yeah.
is like
Oh,
a
it really
whole
is.
variable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have so my band from the old collab Smash days. We're working on a record right now, and I was talking. We're trying to do a thing where we're actually creating like a drum sample library from the drums we're using and presets of all of our guitar tones and all that stuff. So we kind of want to share that and have give people the chance to play around with that and be able to share in it. It's kind of the same thing you were saying. Like, could just put it on a hard drive forever. We could do something with it, but the we had a person, one of my friends, Alice Kane Wolf, who's this really great guitarist I know. I reached out to her about doing a solo part. And she doesn't like to share her tones usually because she's had that experience. She'll create like a line six like tone or whatever. She's in the Helix universe, and people use it and they're like, why doesn't it sound good? It doesn't sound like it sounded for you. And it's like, because you're not me. You need to,
Yep.
so she kind of soured to that, and she didn't want to be providing tones and stuff, which basically just meant that we were going to have her on something else instead. But yeah, I always wonder what people's experience with that is, because I know that's a normal thing that happens, and I feel like everyone kind of has a different place they are with that, with like tone sharing and everything. Some people are really put off by it, and some people are just, you know, they know that's inevitable, but they understand that the average person is going to be able to make something work.
Yeah. I that just goes back to I don't believe in keeping secrets, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like I don't think of it my work at JST, I don't think of it as like, oh, we have this secret code and nobody knows how. Like, no, we're doing work for you. The work that we're doing is to find the combination of math that
Yeah.
creates the compression to get the sound that you want. Like that's the work
Yeah.
that we did. It wasn't a magic trick that we want to keep a secret. It's just we know how to make algorithms, digital signal processing algorithms that sound good. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it. I also understand like not wanting to open yourself up to that, like especially if you see part of your performance or your art is part of your sound, like your sound is part of
Hmm.
that. Yeah, I totally understand that, and that's
Yeah.
valid. Like let people have that if that's what they want. But
I think she was also just put off by the experience of dealing with people who make it your problem that they don't sound like you. I think she just didn't like the interactions she had with people who do that,
right,
which is
yeah,
also totally fair. I mean,
yeah,
we
yep,
asked her to do solo on the record, not create tones for a tone pack. It just came with the territory in this specific case, but
yeah,
I figured you would have experience with that at least.
yeah. There's people that I've wanted to work with, and we've tried to position ourselves the best we can, but they still just
Hmm.
don't want to. They just don't want to be a part of it, which is fine. I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. It's funny. I was thinking for a second about the going back a bit to the like old days, you were talking about the gatekeeping kind of remain, or not the secret keeping or whatever. I remember
Yeah.
kind of before URM how hard it was to find information. I remember people talking about how, like, in the Sneap forum days and stuff. Well, one, everybody knew each other back then. It seemed like half the guys who are popular now were friends on the Sneap forum. But the way that you would kind of get, like, Andy Sneap would come in and kind of drop some knowledge or something, but you weren't getting the URM experience and stuff back then. And it's funny because I think of URM and I think about it in some ways as also being the place where all the next generation kind of hangs out in the same way as the Sneap forums and stuff. I feel like that kind of collaborative mindset has also created a community that I think in another 10 years, when you're hearing interviews with all the big artists and producers, are going to talk about how, like, oh yeah, I remember you in the Roctagon in the URM days, or I remember your team in Collab Smash, or your entries for Tone Throne or whatever. I think that's kind of another great sort of side effect of it, is I think that URM is kind of the community to be in for meeting the next generation of the, like, big awesome people.
Absolutely. I would not be surprised if that's what people talk about in the future.
I know I will be.
I've been backstage at a show before, and you know, be a singer of a pretty large band telling you, like, yeah, we use the mix to see what other mixers would do to our stuff. And I'm just like, that's so smart.
So, I think maybe that latest dropout is a good indication to kind of wrap things up and
Okay.
say our closings and plug whatever is worth plugging. But yeah. Well, thank you for joining. It's been awesome chatting with you and awesome kind of getting your perspective on a lot of that stuff, especially with the business stuff, since, I'm working on slowly building something that I guess you could argue is comparable, though a little different. If there's anything else you want to plug, other than like maybe the new plugin you got coming in or your April Fool's thing or whatever, I think April 1st is actually when I'm probably going to have this up, when it's actually edited and out. But if there's anything else you want to plug, then go ahead and put that in now.
Yeah. I would just say, yeah, for those of you listening that haven't interacted with me inside of URM or don't know me, just Google Joey Sturgis or check out like my YouTube channel or whatever, because there's a lot of really good advice and techniques and stuff that I share there. And then, yeah, as far as the software goes, like, just follow Joey Sturgis Tones on Instagram and check it out. We're making cool stuff, and yeah, trying to make it easier to create good music. Thanks for having me.
Elevating the entire community. Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining. Yeah, this was supposed to happen last week, but I scheduled it wrong and missed it. So I also have to add a quick little thank you for being flexible enough to actually reschedule and being willing to come on even after I completely screwed up the schedule last week.
Yeah, I want to do these podcasts, and I want to talk to people. I'm just in that mood, so
Yeah. Well, they're a ton of fun.
yeah.
I mean, for you, it's definitely a good way to mentor. And for me, it's a good way to just sort of pick people's brains or even get into that kind of conversation mindset. And just like with URM, pick up the little things that everybody kind of does in their own unique way and that can inspire
Sure.
me to grow or do things differently, or even just go, I never thought of that. That's brilliant.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
You as well.